Thank you, Randy. As you know, Governor's Executive Order 2020-142 that requires every school district to develop and adapt a COVID-19 preparedness plan that is informed by the Michigan Return to School Roadmap. The plan requirements are outlined in that executive order, and that plan is being submitted to the board for approval. That this plan meets the requirements of that executive order and must be approved by the board by August 15th. In turn, we need to submit this plan to the ISDs, to our local ISD by August 17th, and then the ISDs forward the plan to the state superintendent of instruction and the state treasurer. And then we also have to post this approved preparedness plan on the homepage of our website at that same time. The plan that we'll be presenting you to this evening was developed by our district's Return to Learn planning team and informed by the vision created to guide this work, as well as the 12 planning teams that were created to process the input, to do the research, and to facilitate further input was provided through staff and parent surveys and our focus group meetings. The teams were guided by the state and federal level communications, health department officials, KRESA staff, and documents that were provided by various professional organizations. We developed a framework for the plan and shared that with the community and staff on July 31st of this year. And then we released more detailed information to the public the following week, much of which is included in the preparedness plan. This plan takes into account the top 3 issues that we heard from our parents, that being safety and health, social emotional engagement and support, and rigorous instructions, as well as I mentioned before, the vision that was created for this work. We recognize as we develop this plan that there are many different opinions about the plan. There is no one-size-fits-all plan that we can present to the board for approval. Families are in different situations, students are in different situations, staff members are in different situations, and everyone has their own comfort level about many of the practices and protocols that we're putting into the plan. It's impossible to present a plan that will be acceptable to everyone. However, this plan represents a lot of hard work by many individuals and what we believe is a responsible plan that allows us to begin the 2021 school year. And with that introduction, I call on Dr. Pasco and Mike Huber, who will guide you through our preparedness plan and answer board member questions. Gentlemen?
Yep. Good evening, Superintendent Belang and trustees. Mr. Huber and I are here tonight to present the main components of the 2021 Return to Learn Preparedness Plan for the board to review and approve. We hope you had the opportunity to watch the videos and some of that information that was sent out last week, as well as read through the plan that was submitted to the board. Like Mark said, we realize no plan can meet all of the needs of our families and our students, but we feel we may have developed a plan that does its best to meet as many of those needs as possible. It's based on the feedback we received from parent and staff surveys and from all the incredible work that was done over the summer by our RTL facilitators, our Return to Learn teams, our focus groups, and that included parents, that included some students. So, we just want to say thank you to everyone who participated and contributed their time and expertise over the summer months. I just want you to know it's much appreciated from all of us that were involved in those processes. So our goal tonight is to share some of the elements from our RTL plan. Some of the stuff that you saw in the videos will be embedded because, like Randy said, all of this is embedded in the preparedness plan. We will highlight some specific elements in the plan, why we're selecting these options, and do our best to make the connection to our preparedness plan with what you see in the slides today. We'll also be answering some of the common questions that have been brought to our attention from parents, staff, and even board trustees over the last week or so. We want to take a deeper dive into those areas. 3 key components that were part of some of our further conversation over the past 2 weeks really focused on safety and hygiene in our buildings, our response to potential and verified COVID cases was a big conversation, and then our daily student schedule, what that looks like both for in-person and for virtual. So we've mentioned this before, but we created a vision statement to kind of guide our work through the summer. It was focused on equity, safety, flexibility, and of course, the social emotional well-being of all members of our school community. This model and approach to instruction this fall provides us a large amount of flexibility for families and students throughout the system. Our values that emerged, again, we stated this in the video that gathered from our PPS families, educators, administration, which ultimately kind of served as the heart of this plan. Those values were social emotional health of our students and staff, the health and safety of them as well, and the instructional rigor. Those are three things that were stated as we needed to continue to focus in on as top priorities. Process began way back in March when the state of emergency was declared. That led us to a process of bringing a lot of stakeholders to the table as we looked at what the new future of learning looks like. The process is on our PPS Return to Learn site. You can take a look at that if you haven't. But tonight we want to highlight maybe a few of those steps that we've taken along the way. So before the governor released that Michigan Safe Schools plan on June 30th, we had already recruited 24 facilitators. They helped lead 12 different return to learn teams. They brought these team members together, made up of a variety of stakeholders, as we mentioned. They were given protocols and specific focus areas to work on. And then they in turn provided us recommendations for each scenario that we could return in the 2021 school year. This work is continuous as they finalize some of the details, protocols, and procedures for each of the areas that need to be addressed as we move into the fall. So again, thanks to all those that participated and continue to participate. Our next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about how PPS is aligning to the Michigan phases in terms of our instructional plan. Some of the feedback that we've been getting around and questions was around, why did we not go with the hybrid model that was put out there? So we figured we should provide some rationale as to why we ended up looking at something a little differently. So one was the fact that students would only have access to our buildings 2 times a week. Okay, so it was a hybrid model where you were A and B, and if you were in the A group, you came on 2 days. If you were in a B group, you came on 2 days, and then 3 days of online learning. So both the elementary and secondary models now allow increased in-person contact. So with the model that's presented, there's the opportunity at both elementary and secondary to be in the building 4 days a week for support. When we looked at our ability to follow the cleaning and disinfecting protocols under the hybrid model, there was a lot of concerns in not being able to keep up with the recommendations of the frequency of the cleaning with all of the transitions that would have been built into the model. So kids moving around the building frequently was going to be a challenge. There was also concern around change in instructional modality. We felt that by going a couple days in person to 3 days of online and mixing that back and forth, that we would lose a lot of kids and students may not be able to keep up with that change of pace. So in terms of the continuity of student learning, we thought that was going to be impacted, as well as we heard some teacher concern around being able to flow with the scope and sequence of their curriculum and how that might be impacted. And also, again, these aren't an exhaustive list, but just some of the key points as to why we looked at something different. The hybrid model would have made it very challenging to transition out of, say, if we went to a phase 5 in particular, we would have had some negative impacts on our master schedules, and we would have had very limited course offerings as we made that transition. So it wasn't going to be seamless to get out of a hybrid model. And I know lots of districts are doing different things, from hybrids to all virtual to all in person, and we get that. But when we looked at that, again, it was not decisions made in isolation. We had lots of folks looking at this and having some deep conversations around it. But that was some of the rationale behind why the hybrid model wasn't part of the RTL or preparedness plan. So let's move into some of the phases and how we're aligning that within our instructional plan within the documents that you have. So phase 1 through 3, obviously we'd be in all PPS virtual remote instruction, both elementary and secondary. And like has already been previously mentioned, there would be the option of the KVIC, which is the county virtual model. So for young 5th through 5th grade, it's a program called Lincoln Learning. And for 6th through 12th grade, it'd be an option of the Michigan virtual courses. Mike has a link here. Mike's kind of controlling the slides tonight. Mike, if you want to click on phase 1 through 3 and maybe give some of the highlights there on our preparedness plan, I think that might be helpful for everyone. You're muted, Mike.
Just to double check there, Dr. Pasco, is it showing the preparedness plan now on the presentation, or is it still on the slide deck?
No, you got it. Yeah, phase 1 through 3 is up there.
So what I'll do is we jump into some of these links, and thank you, trustees, for taking the time to dive in deep with us on a lot of the preparedness plan, as I'm linking things from our slide deck back into the plan, not only for you as trustees to see, but also for families at home to kind of see those connections. And I know we have a number of people watching us on the live stream right now. And so what I've jumped to right now is the phase 1 through 3 instruction that our teams are recommending for this. And as we go into virtual, and you'll hear Dr. Pasco and I share this later on, the lessons we learned in spring, we're transforming our instruction as we come here in the fall. And so we know we're going to provide a lot more consistent contact with students and teachers and keep that core of those relationships consistent. We're in phases 1 through 3, because we are all virtual, we're making sure that we've got a curriculum and a plan in place. Our current phase 4 model, which you'll hear the most detail about tonight, provides you with a foundation that we can move easily between phase 1 and 3 if we do go that way, or phase 5 if we move into a more relaxed environment. So it does allow us a lot of flexibility the way we've designed phase 4 as the cornerstone in the program. We'll still have all our adherence to IEPs and 504s and that support network. We'll have technology and access, as we always have, available for all of our students. And we're definitely going to support that. Our communication platforms become more aligned using Google Classroom as our core link. And then, of course, as always, emails back and forth from teachers and families are there. So there's communication pieces and all those elements. These are all on page 9 of the preparedness plan that we provided for you guys on Friday, and then an updated version on Monday. So we also have all the protocols and safety protocols in here that we'll do. There's not many or as many during phases 1 through 3, since there is schools closed for in-person things. And so we'll establish other elements like Curious Kids and engaging with them, and what it looks like to ensure that the people who do have to report have the personal protective equipment. All of those things and district guidelines will be met, and you'll hear some of those details as possible. Our food service, like we did in spring, will continue if we're in phases 1 through 3. All athletics and extracurriculars in phases 1 through 3 would be suspended. I do know that our athletic and extracurricular return to learn team talked about what it looks like to kind of reimagine those traditional programs to make sure things can still happen and students can still stay engaged. So those are the elements inside of our return to learn plan for phases 1 through 3.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. And so, like Mr. Huber said, we're going to talk a lot about phase 4 because that's the phase that we're currently in, and the majority of the slides today will gear towards that. So if we were to move to phase 5, we'd be talking a lot more around moving to some type of in-person instruction with keeping that choice of PPS virtual. I think that was a lot of questions that we had from parents in terms of when we do make a transition, hopefully we can make a transition to some form of in-person instruction, both at the elementary and secondary level, do we have the ability to remain as PPS virtual students? And so we have that as part of the plan. Also in phase 5, we would continue to offer KVIC and Lincoln Learning, as well as those Michigan virtual options. Mike, do you want to click on phase 5 within the document and maybe highlight some of the stuff in there as well?
Certainly. As we look at phase 5 and what some of those elements change, we know that in phase 5, and now I have to scroll back down to it, with a more relaxed environment, we're able to bring in some more connection and contact. And so we believe we'll be moving back in phase 5 to a normal 5-day instructional week and a normal school day schedule at that time. That's our current belief when we hit phase 5 based on the safety considerations that are there. And so you'll notice our curriculum and instruction elements here will look like they have looked traditionally, where we're continuing to provide what Portage Public Schools parents and families and students have expected. We also know, though, that we're going to continue our virtual programming. We think that there's enough consideration there for students and families that have concerns about returning even under phase 5, that we're going to want to continue our virtual programming at that time. And so we have that whole of that virtual programming referred back in the other section of our preparedness plan that we're submitting to you to approve tonight. But we know that we'll continue our programming, and a lot of the adjustments based on the safety factors, and you'll see a lot of them for phase 4, will have to be modified when we get to phase 5 and relaxed a bit. And we want to kind of allow ourselves an opportunity to get into phase 4 and see what things look like and how that works before we start predicting what phase 5 safety protocols might be that go above and beyond the Michigan Safe Schools Roadmap. So that's kind of how we're taking a look at our phase 5 curriculum elements.
Good. Thanks, Mike. And like we said, phase 4, we're going to cover a lot of that throughout the presentation. You know, the gist is we have a plan that calls for Monday through Thursday in-person instruction at the elementary level. That's young 5 through 5th grade, with the choice of accessing that similar curriculum online from home. Secondary, everything's going to be virtually based, remote instruction with the ability to come in for in-building access into certain spaces, and we'll cover that as well. Again, throughout, there's the thread of the opportunity to have a young 5 through 5th Lincoln Learning virtual opportunity through the county, as well as 6 through 12 Michigan virtual. Mike, you want to share a little bit about the survey and selection results thus far that was sent out last week?
Certainly. Maybe, perhaps, something rolled right there. We'll do the whole deck right now. So we sent out 2 surveys, and I know you heard in some of the parent comments around our initial survey didn't contain some of the other choices that we now are adding into our plan. And so we initially sent that survey. You've seen some of those results. And we had in there that our phase 4 was going to look like a hybrid. There might be an option for a PPS virtual, because we were already starting to see that our families and students were wanting something that supported virtual while staying with Portage Public Schools, and/or we wanted to make sure we understood what families were wishing to withdraw from Portage based on this plan. And so we did that initial survey. When we got those results back, we started adjusting our plan based on the feedback and concerns we received. So some of those components were identified. We brought some of those back to our return to learn teams to take a look at. And some of those components for us were caused us to kind of, and I'm not sure why that's doing that. I apologize. Caused us to change our viewpoint on what our phase 4 would look like. We needed a phase 4 that allowed students to move from virtual back into the building without a long delay in doing that. We knew that if we moved from phases 1 through 3 or to phase 5, we needed to be able to do that as well. We also know that we wanted to make sure that we were able to support what that learning looked like in each of those buildings. And that's what we're going to get into the detail that Dr. Pasco will get with you on. Looking at some of those survey piece of information. So here's our initial survey that we sent out. We had about 72% choosing the traditional school. I have that labeled backwards. And the PPS virtual was 25%. And that kind of told us that, yes, we had a great deal of interest in our virtual hybrid, that there was some interest that was there, and that our PPS virtual had some concerns with it. And we wanted to know what factors were influencing parents' decisions. And as we shared before, health, safety, social, emotional, and instructional rigor were important. And it's not that any of these were missed in our conversations. It's that we knew there were some things that were big points and trigger points for our families. When we looked at that comfort level, like we shared at the last board meeting, we had about 65% saying we hit our phase 4 just about right. So they were comfortable with being in the building. There were a handful that thought it was too strict and another handful that thought it was not strict enough. So we can see that that kind of diversity, I don't know if we were expecting that. So we knew that there were a lot of parents who wanted choice and who had a different viewpoint in what they were seeing in the data. And then we're looking at what would happen at a phase 5 in our plan if they were to come back for that and where we were at. And that, if we're back fully, leads us to this number here where about 32% thought our phase 5 plan of let's just be back, business as usual, might not be strict enough for them. We are getting current parent selections in. So as you know, we opened up a window for parent surveys to come back in. I pulled this data this afternoon for us to kind of give you guys a snapshot of what we're looking at from our current elementary selections. We had a lot of conversations with parents like where they were asking questions like, well, who's selecting what and what are the ratios of those? The abbreviations at the top are face-to-face, PPS virtual, KVIC, and withdraw from the program. And so we also have some numbers here by grade level. And what I want to point out is that about 50-50 approach. So since this is elementary, and you'll hear more about our elementary plan in a minute, that we've got the ability for elementary students to come in face-to-face. We also have an opportunity for the same curriculum for students to get that virtually. And we're just a little above 50% split between these two. And so that's our elementary. If we look at our middle school selections, we can say that our in-person, so our middle school and high school model looks different, and you'll hear more detail about what that schedule of the day looks like and how we're delivering that content. Our in-person is much lower, and that's because we're not following a traditional schedule, so we understand that's part of it. And we know that our PPS virtual is reasonably high. So there's our middle school selections. And then our current high school mimics those middle school selections. So we're seeing those numbers, and we're seeing, some support for our PPS programming inside of that. We're at about 7,500 responses back right now on the surveys. And that gives us a good lens at where our students will land. And there is flexibility here. So students and families will be able to choose to go back and forth as necessary or as some conditions arise based on that. So that's a good look at our survey results. Dr. Pasco, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like me to add into this component.
No, thank you for sharing that. That's important data to let folks know where we're at and what kind of responses we've been getting, because obviously those numbers are going to help us plan for students coming back, particularly in building access and creating our sections at the elementary level. If you want to go to the next slide, Mike, let's take a closer look at the health and safety protocols designed mainly for phase 4 and 5. We'll have to modify as required and as expected as we go. But many of the questions and feedback that we've received over the last few weeks has related specifically to these 4 items that you see on the screen. And we want to highlight the work that was done by our teams this summer that developed plans around this. I know the facilities team spent a lot of time talking about health and safety protocols and working with the CDC and the Kalamazoo Health Department, among other resources, to put together these 4 plans here. So these were some of the categories that we were planning for, but also folks had a lot of questions around that staff and student screening prior to the school day, mask wearing and the breaks that go along with that, the triage and quarantine spaces, and then what happens if we have a positive COVID test result and how do we contact trace, etc. So Mike, do you want to click on, maybe start with, we'll just go in order and maybe walk through staff and student screening prior to this.
Of course, this is one of the things that happens right away. We know students are going to need this to happen, even prior to stepping on the bus. So let's talk about the staff screening first. Before entering a building, staff are going to self-screen for symptoms daily. This is something that's been going on since we basically closed the administration building down and then reopened it for people to come in, which was quite quick. Probably within a week, as we were starting to do it, we started some staff screening protocols, and they've kind of been modified a little bit. And so if the tracking form that we're using right now indicates a potential risk for COVID, staff are directed to contact their supervisor or principal right away. And then the next steps for that staff member is provided by the principal, supervisor, HR department. And of course, they're consulting with their own health professional. And so we're going to provide a copy, the printed copy of the screening tool. We're putting that together, but the screening tool link here is active, and you're able to kind of go to a document right now that shows what's there. Our Return to Learn health and wellness team has been working on this with the county health department. So we're going to simplify this so that someone can take it online very rapidly. This doesn't look like anything else. If anyone has already taken a kind of a COVID screener anywhere else, this looks very, very similar, and basically asks a series of questions. And this one is based on the information we got from the Kalamazoo County Health Department. And we feel that that's a good way for that protocol to work for staff. And then they'll work out the next steps of the process from there, not only just with their administrator, but we want to make sure they're taken care of. And then that goes through with HR. Processing student screening looks a little different. For health and safety of our students, the public health department require students to be screened before entering the school building. And then not only due to the time and the interruption and the process at entry, the health department and the CDC don't recommend that the screenings actually be done by the schools. So we do have a parent agreement form that is going to be uploaded into Skyward about screening your student at the beginning of every day before coming in. And we're going to send a hard copy of that screening process document home for them to use and to post. Principals send that document frequently in parent communications. That's our plan with that. And then in there we have we've already developed this screening parent agreement, and so that link is active, and we're all set to go with that thanks to our Return to Learn health and wellness team. And they've done a great job of kind of putting that together. And we know sometimes that commitment can be high, can be low, but we know we want to kind of encourage and build those processes. So we have a second checklist for them to kind of post in their home. This is the same thing you'd get if you were calling your physician about your son or daughter or yourself when you're trying to figure out if there's a potential case for COVID. And then they can follow up from there. We also have references on the bottom of each of these documents that goes back to the CDC school considerations and our documents for school from the Kalamazoo County Health Department that they provided us. All of these links are active, and we're either hosting the document or it's pulled off site. So this is 9 pages, and we have this broken down into posters for both the school as well as instructional materials for parents to kind of have and use at their homes. So that's kind of our process there around screening protocols that'll happen before the student even leaves the house, before the staff member gets into the building.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Lots of questions around mask wearing and mask breaks. Maybe click on that one and pull out some highlights if you can.
Yeah, we did get a lot of questions around mask breaks. In fact, one of them from the FAQ asked what it is. And we know that young 5th through 5th grade will have a scheduled mask break throughout the day when it's appropriate, especially for social distancing. So when you have the mask on, it appears from the research that the proximity can be closer to between people without transmission. With no mask, we definitely need to have that space established. So we know that if we're going to do a mask break, we need the social distance in place. So, but during specific parts of reading lessons or snack or lunchtime, and there will be some other times where students can safely remove their masks to take a break from that. And that's what a mask break is, because we know it's going to be hard to maintain throughout the day. We know the same is true of staff. They're going to need the same thing also. So we're going to ensure that's there. We do have protocols for mask wearing and mask breaks. So when requirement of in-person, we can walk through all the details here, but staff members are expected to wear a mask throughout the school day unless they have an exemption note from a physician. And staff who are required to wear that can remove it as appropriate when eating and drinking and communicating with a person who is deaf and hard of hearing. We do have, I know Kat Frink has been making clear masks for staff to wear and for students to wear in order for lip reading to occur, and that improves that communication piece with students. So we also are saying that all students, young 5th through 12th grade, will wear a mask throughout the school day. We know that that will be important for them to do. They'll have the scheduled mask breaks as well, and mask breaks. And those with medical conditions that have been confirmed or outlined in an IEP or 504, we have will build in those exceptions for them. We do specify the types of masks here. We are going to be providing disposable masks, and I know that that's one of the questions coming up on some PPE things that we'll highlight for you here in a bit. But we know that we want to stick with these type of coverings are the best. We will have disposable masks for students that forgot their mask or something happens to their mask during the day. But cloth face covering, surgical mask, and an N95 respirator are appropriate. So we know that when they're getting there without a mask, we've got one in the school, and we also have a limited number of cloth masks that we've purchased to be issued by building principals to families that need those. We also include some mask wearing protocols, how to wear it and how to take care of it. We're going to put in there a how-to video and some guidelines as well. And we have some elementary social stories that that our team was able to find and put together that help students that might struggle a bit more with wearing a mask all the time or consistently during the day. These will help kind of ease any anxiety or fears around doing that. So that's some information around mask wearing that our Return to Learn teams have put together.
Great. We talked a lot about building triage and quarantine spaces. If you want to click on that, and then maybe Mike, I'll talk about the positive COVID tests and contact tracing.
Okay. And just looking at the triage area, we're expected in the preparedness plan to have a place for students to be who may be potential. So if a student shows up to school and over the course of the day, they start to have symptoms and a staff member is encountering them, that's when we'll have that student head down to the triage area, and we have extra material stock things there, and we'll begin the cleaning process that's there. And we're going to have Kalamazoo County Health Department potentially do some training with us on awareness and things that we need to have in place when we encounter those signs and symptoms, because we're not health professionals. We want to be able to get them connected with that right away. And so we'll have a space in each of our buildings that's that triage area. We also have a procedure for suspected cases. So we walk through all the steps of walking them in there, making sure they're putting on their PPE properly, and following through with that. And then they'll do a symptom screening. And then since that's not enough for us, we'll let the family pediatrician be able to make decisions from that point in time, since there's a lot of symptom overlap between COVID-19 and other illnesses. So, and then if we do suspect COVID is there, then we're going to get the student out of that space and then take them back. And Dr. Pascal will talk a bit more about what we do when that happens and how we're going to clean the spaces after that and follow up with any quarantining.
Great. You want to click on that last one, Mike? I'll help that. Okay, so protocol for responding to positive tests, presumed positive, and contact tracing. Lots of questions around this and different scenarios being posed. So each of our buildings will have a designated staff member who will be in contact with the health department weekly to get regular community health updates. I know Penny Bourne and Brenda O'Rourke, those are two individuals that have been extremely helpful up until this point, particularly as we brought athletes back to our fields and areas this summer, as well as reviewing some of our initial plans. Just want to say thank you to the Kalamazoo Health Department for working with us up until this point. I know they're going to be a big part of our process and plans as we go throughout the school year. So that designated staff member will call the health department with any presumed positive or positive COVID-19 cases with staff or students, and then get individual guidance basis. Kalamazoo Health Department has been wonderful with providing us with all the links that we see there. Mike kind of opened up a few of those, but a process for COVID positive case or COVID exposure at school is a helpful document. And then also when we talk about this and notifying folks, the COVID privacy and scenario example is also a very helpful document for our liaison and school administrators as we talk about what happens if someone at school tests positive for COVID-19. So if that happens, if a student or staff member is confirmed positive with a diagnostic test, a nose or throat swab, or a doctor states that they may be positive. We'll learn about that case. The school liaison will contact the health department. In turn, the health department will look at the case and call the COVID-19 liaison and have conversation around that. They'll review the case, determine the isolation period and any non-school contacts. That individual would complete their isolation period and then return to school. The school district and building, as well as the health department, will work together to identify any close contacts. They'll be notified by the health department and placed in a 14-day quarantine based off of their recommendations, based off of the last exposure. So we can have a close contact not developing symptoms. They'll complete their quarantine period and then come back to school. Or a close contact will become symptomatic and test positive and now confirmed or a probable case, and then follow the recommendations based off of that. So we'll send out a general notification to those parents and staff, again, keeping in mind confidentiality and protecting those individuals based off of the guidance that we're getting from Kalamazoo Health Department. There was a couple other helpful documents I felt in here: how to handle symptoms and household exposure, and then again, the COVID privacy and scenario example. And then there's a really helpful document from the Kent County Health Department, school teachers and administrators COVID-19 toolkit, some of the things that we'll be reviewing as we do more training with our staff upon our return. All right, Mike, I know that was a lot, but that was the gist of some of those 4 key areas when we talk about health and safety protocols as we move into the school year.
Yep. Thanks, trustees, for letting us take a deep dive there. That's been pretty important and essential for what we're doing. Hopefully, we're answering a lot of your questions. I know we're answering a lot of parent questions, and we're only hitting some of the highlights on the questions that we're actually asking. So I know there's more in there than that. Yeah. But thanks for letting us take the time.
Yeah, thank you. So we're currently in phase 4. So we're able to offer 3 choices to our Portage elementary families, young 5th through 5th grade. So the first choice, face-to-face, Monday through Thursday, with Friday being like an online connection and experience. That's PPS curriculum taught by PPS teachers at school. Second option is the PPS virtual, with our curriculum taught by our teachers, accessed online from home. And then third is the county virtual option, also known as KVIC, but the program being Lincoln Learning. That's a non-PPS instructor. That's a county instructor, and it's not connected to our PPS curriculum. You know, there's a lot of questions about, if I select KVIC, can I ensure that my student will be connected to a PPS teacher? And most likely they won't be. I know we've been asked to provide 1 or 2 teachers for potential training to learn about these programs, and I think we're gonna, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, we're gonna try to identify maybe 1 or 2 to learn more about them. But to start, they won't be connected to any of our PPS teachers. So I think that was something to clear up so that folks can make an informed decision. Let's move to face-to-face, Mike, on the next slide. So this is designed for elementary families that are comfortable with returning their student to this in-school environment, Monday through Thursdays, again, with Friday serving as some type of home learning. We're going to get into some of the details on all the stuff on the right in the next few slides, but this choice provides the opportunity for students to return to school, interact daily and safely with their teachers and classmates. Again, you just saw all the protocols. We'll continue to look at that as we go. We'll learn more also once we have kids back, but it's giving choice. It's going to be face-to-face unless Michigan moves to phases 1 through 3, at which point we're all going to have to pivot to the virtual option. I want to go to the FAQ really quick. We've been developing our frequently asked questions on the website, and we've been doing our best to kind of pull common themes and questions. And Mike and I talked a little bit throughout the week of how we can insert them into this presentation. So one of them was around at the elementary level, what's the flexibility between plans? So our answer to that is, if an elementary family selects either in-person or virtual learning, it doesn't seem to be the right fit, it will be important to connect with the building principal. That'd be the first step, is contact the building principal. They'll work with the family to determine kind of what the issues are, maybe what some of the barriers are with the particular program that they chose, and what those next steps need to be to make a possible move. So we're definitely open to that. We want to be able to serve families in terms of what their needs are. And they may think a choice is what is best to start, and then they might find out some other information based off an experience or what they're hearing from other families. So, we're more than open to having those conversations with families and making sure that we can transition at the right times. But in terms of our own face-to-face versus the PPS virtual, we'll definitely work with families on making those transitions when needed. I don't know, Mike, if you had anything to add to the face-to-face slide or not.
No, I think you covered it, because we're going to get into the details here on the next slide.
All right. So this one, obviously, we covered in the video quite a bit, really focusing on the social emotional health. That continues to be a primary focus. We're going to work closely with the Kalamazoo Health Department. We ask families to conduct an at-home self-screening each day. That will help guide parents and guardians knowing if their students should attend school that day. Mitigation strategies are going to be a big part of what we do. Schedule hand washing throughout the day. Masks, like we said, will be worn by staff and students, except for those that are medically deemed not to wear them. And also we'll have some breaks in there as well, as we mentioned. This will be a time where students can safely remove their masks, take a break from having it on their faces. It's difficult to have that on. We all know that for extended periods of time. Mike shared some of the numbers that we're getting back from the elementary. So some of the questions around, the number of folks that are in the classes and what those class sizes look like. Right now, they're looking pretty favorable. They're looking like they would be in the teens. So that's allowing us to implement those safety measures and make sure that we're following the things that we've established that we will want to put in place. So help us allow to safe distance students and to follow those safety protocols as best as possible. We talked about the quarantine spaces. We'll make sure that that is set up in each of our buildings. And then protocols for cleaning. We're really focusing on the high touch surface areas as well as during transition time. So when we know kids are leaving out of a space for a particular time, that's when our cleaning crews will come in and help get things disinfected and sanitized and clean. Again, those will be all attached into that document. One of the questions that we got was around what PPE is available, personal protective equipment, right? People want to know what we have on hand. So right now, and this may have been bumped up since the last time I've got these stats, but our facilities team, obviously they've been working around the clock. I got to give a shout out to Mr. Heron and his team and Al for getting all this stuff together, but they've been working around the clock to get the supplies that are needed. So far we've ordered over 40,000 adult and child disposable masks. We have infrared non-touch thermometers for each building. There's 25 cloth masks, 500 face shields, 400 hand sanitizer dispensers. We have 400 quarts and 400 half-gallon pump sanitizers. We ordered 3 additional large Clorox 360 machines. Those were things that we would spray down our facilities in the past, particularly when we had some of the times off last year. We have desk shields for our secretaries. There's 400 disinfectant spray bottles and 20,000 rubber gloves. We continue to add to that list and make sure that we have all the necessities in order to keep folks safe and also to provide the personal protective equipment that we're required to. So that was a pretty big one. Mike, I don't know if you had any cues in mind around this.
Yeah, I know we're getting asked about hand sanitizer versus hand washing and some of the factors there, and we're going to be doing both. We want to make sure students are washing their hands using the 20-second hand washing protocol. So we've built that into some of the elementary lessons. I know they're working on that. When students arrive, before lunch, after playing outside, and after using the restroom, obviously, those are the key times when students and teachers will be implementing, hand washing. Staff are going to ask students to wash hands when there's sneezing or coughing going on. And then we also have the hand sanitizer readily available. And I believe we got asked a question on, are we making sure that we're not using any of those 75 brands that might contain methanol in them? And I believe Ron's checking on that to ensure that only the hand sanitizer that we would put out would be approved, and making sure that it's appropriate for use. We know that safety factor, and we're spending a lot of time here hitting some of those questions that parents have asked or that you guys as trustees have asked. or staff have asked to kind of make sure that you guys understand what protocols we've put into place and for students to be safe.
No.
Right. Okay, Mike, if you want to move to the next one, let's take a look at curriculum and instruction and then communication. We've done some curriculum audits and design teams over the summer, particularly at the elementary level. I got to thank Dr. Sheehan and all her work with our math and ELA teams out there. They've done a lot of reworking throughout the summer to get ready for the fall. We've got to be mindful of potential content gaps and students' readiness for new curriculum. Those are all things that our teachers are thinking about. We'll still instruct using our high quality PPS curriculum that's based off of the Michigan Common Core standards. We'll follow a daily schedule, traditional elementary day, Monday through Thursday, with specials and breaks in the classroom. So lunch will be provided in the cafeteria and gym, like I said in the video, with dividers in order to separate the classes from one another. And we'll take attendance as usual, keeping in mind the new exemptions and virtual supports for students who may be out sick. We'll use quality instructional strategies. We'll continue to use assessment of student work, looking at constructive feedback and timely feedback. Students will need use of technology and resources that will be provided if needed. We'll also make sure that those that need IEP 504 or EL supports, that's in place. And our specials and encore classes will be provided in our classrooms with PE, again, being outdoors as much as possible. Hopefully we have a good fall and we can take advantage of some nice weather to get kids outside. Mike, I don't know if you had any FAQ around curriculum instruction or the communication part around Google Classroom platform.
Other than to say, I know we're going to have the we're going to have a little more detail on curriculum later on. I know that most of it relates to schedule of the day and elements at elementary and at secondary. So we can talk about what those things and the standards we're looking at are. But I do know that I think you've got a few questions related to parent pieces that were in there around communication.
Okay, let's go to food services, recess, and transportation. I think that might be maybe a more appropriate place to highlight those questions. So we're committed to providing assistance to families that rely on our school meals. We'll continue to provide the grab and go meals 5 days a week at each of the elementary schools. There is a daily recess time that's connected to our lunchtime, as previously stated. So we'll have a staff member who will stay with certain groups during lunch and recess. They'll have their designated spot for lunch with their classmates, either in the lunchroom or the gym, separated by the dividers that we have. Each class will have their designated spot for recess as well with their classmates, and then we'll rotate that throughout the week and daily as well. When they're outside playing, our custodians will be in there disinfecting, sanitizing, getting ready for the next group. Again, we do encourage, if you can transport your student to and from, we would appreciate that to reduce the numbers that are taking our transportation. We know some families are able to do that, so we'd appreciate if you were able to help us in those regards. For those that need to ride the bus, we'll have our normal stops, pick up and drop off times. We ask that you do some symptom screening, be performed prior to the bus arrival. We'll also provide hand sanitizer as students enter. They'll have assigned seats. Both the driver and students will have masks on. And again, we had mentioned that we'll have the windows down when weather permits. So one of the commonly asked questions I know on the FAQ was around, well, we had two. It was, each building is developing, it's actually, what is the protocol for arrival and departure? So parents want to know that. So we're developing those at the building principal level. They'll be sharing those procedures out based off of their own individual layouts. So not all of our buildings are the same. So they're gonna send some information as to how students enter safely and how they exit based off of their individual layouts. The other question that we're getting pretty commonly is, will parents be allowed in our elementary buildings? How will my young 5 through kindergarten student know where to go? So we kind of put those together. So our response is parents will not be allowed to enter the building. If there's a sick child or need to drop off or pick up early You would call the office and then follow that building's procedures. So our young 5 through kindergarten teachers will be working together to develop a welcome back to school video for our new families. They'll introduce them to the classroom and to the building. They'll also be meeting with families virtually on August 31st to answer any questions. They want to meet your children, go over any procedures that they may have. Also, young 5 through K students will start their first day of school on September 1st. Each building principal will be communicating with all families, welcoming everyone back, providing them with important information for a smooth transition back to school. Okay, so that was one that we were commonly getting and wanted to put that out there in this presentation. Mike, did you have anything else under food service, recess, or transportation that was commonly being brought to the last
I know we've been asked about sack lunches versus how we're handling the tray and the delivery. And I spoke with Susan Livingston today just to kind of get some more understanding of how we're doing that. We are still going to be using the system that we have always before. So first of all of our food service workers who've been doing food up to this point have been wearing masks and gloves, and we've been doing that all summer long. Of course, when we're delivering large quantities of food out into our community, that we use a sack lunch process, mostly for ease of delivery. When they're in the schools, those will be handed on the tray where the food service worker will be putting all of that on there. Since everything is being done by pre-orders, all those will be preset. And so when a class comes down, that class will be handed their material, or I'm sorry, handed their food person by person. At the secondary level, they'll do the usual. They're going to have 6-foot spacing in their line, and they never contact any of the food. So all the food is prepared behind shields and handed to the student directly. That allows us also to do a hot meal for students when they're there for breakfast and for lunch, regardless of the level we're at. So that allows us to provide good food service. So I know that was there for some of food service, and Susan was happy to give me some insight into that.
Good. Thanks, Mike. Let's move into choice 2, Portage Virtual for elementary students. All right, so our primary goal, if a family chooses Portage Virtual, is to open schools virtually with a schedule that is as close to traditional as possible. So we'll follow that consistent instructional schedule and provide more live face-to-face, what we would call synchronous student learning. And that was one of the big differences between some of the questions we were getting around, you know, our experience from March to the end of the school year last year. How's that going to be different than PPS virtual? You know, this will be more synchronous. It's also going to be new learning. You know, we didn't cover a whole lot of new learning in those last few months. We didn't want to lose a ton of kids. So the week will include 4 days of live face-to-face instruction, Monday through Thursday. As we mentioned, Fridays will be used for some type of additional online learning, as well as some connections for teacher assistant or intervention to connect with those families and students as needed. Our core curriculum will be consistent between PPS virtual and face-to-face instruction. So we're going to just put that curriculum online for those that deem it's not, for whatever reason, they do not want their students to come back Monday through Thursday. They'll follow a similar curriculum and scope and sequence as kids that are coming to school and accessing in-class teachers. One of the most commonly FAQs I think we have in terms of PPS virtual, Mike, if you can go to that slide, it's okay, is will the students be assigned a teacher from their building like they were actually in school, or will it be another PPS teacher? Will the teacher be dedicated to a certain amount of children? So the response is we cannot guarantee that a student will receive a virtual teacher from their home building. However, it will be a PPS certified elementary teacher. Students will be in class with other students from their home building though. We will be assigning 2 groups of virtual students to each teacher. Each group will have about 20 students, so they'll focus on 2 sections of kids. PPS virtual, another one. Do you get hands-on materials, textbooks, worksheets, etc., or is everything going to be online in terms of materials? So the answer is there will be a balance of materials. Not everything will be online. We will have a procedure for getting the materials to you, and I'm sure that will be part of the building principal's communication for back to school. So that was one, Mike, that I know was a pretty commonly asked question. I'm not sure whether or not it got posted on the FAQ, but that would be the response as of today. Mike, do you want to go over different comparison? I know a lot of families are asking about what's the difference between spring learning to what we're going to offer from 2021 virtual.
And this was one of the first questions that we got from families when we were starting to talk about even a hybrid or any kind of virtual learning. So we definitely are requiring student participation, and we're using a blend of live instruction with our curriculum assigned specifically to standards. So we would definitely have upped that. We'll have more details about what teachers have been learning the past few days and what they've been working on through summer. You've heard Dr. Pasco talk about elementary, ELA, and math over summer. We definitely will have increased accountability with students, assignments, grading, and scheduling of things. And then we're going to use Google Classroom for our platform for delivery. And while we may use other tools, and we certainly do, everything will flow through that platform. And then we're targeting instruction. We know that we have some gaps we want to close, and that we're going to want to scaffold and support learning for those students to get into them, because we're no longer in emergency learning. We're consistent with this. We have experiences here. And then ongoing assessment and personalized feedback. We definitely know that we need that feedback and assessment to happen for us to be able to continue to get students to grow. So those are just some of the big changes, and there has been a lot of staff learning that's happened through Teach Camp. And I know I have that coming up on another slide here.
Yep. Mike, if you want to move to the next one, I think a lot of families are wondering, what does a virtual parent schedule look like? Do you want to click on that link where it says virtual parent schedule and FAQ, and maybe walk our folks through a potential schedule that our elementary principals have been working on in the last week or so?
Certainly, yeah. Our elementary principals have worked on this in conjunction with our elementary return to learn team leaders. So we definitely have some elements in there, and there will probably be some schedules that vary depending on grade level, with the caveat that all students will have these components as part of it. They'll have a daily preparation time, a morning meeting, ELA instruction. They'll do independent work, have movement breaks, do small group instruction, and math instruction. So we know that those components are consistent daily for those students. We've got all the essential materials that will be provided, including any manipulatives. Those will all go home to students. We'll either mail those or have those dropped off. There will be a virtual orientation that we're going to do to start out the school year. In fact, in all of our levels, our first few weeks are dedicated to social emotional learning, process learning, around our protocols, and ensuring that we're ready to go to do quality instruction. Depending on how old the student is, there'll be some different levels of instructional time per day. And you can see some numbers there ranging from 120 up to around 180 minutes. And so here's a sample young fives through second grade schedule that starts with student daily preparation in the morning. They have around a 35-minute block, and the elementary is looking at moving into groups of 2, so that for the online component, we can have some students doing the self-paced pieces while the teacher is meeting live with the other group of students. And then that role flips. And so group 2 then goes into a live portion while group 1 does the self-paced work at that time. This allows us to basically meet more student learning needs, as well as give them a break from having to do this interaction in a group setting for over an hour at a time. So we also have a movement break and some independent work, or possibly some small group connection at that time. So if a teacher is noticing something and needs to have 2 students meet with them, we now kind of need a structure for that schedule to be put in place. We've got math instruction, again, using that same hybrid of math instruction with the teacher and self-paced independent work, and the groups flip-flop. We have a 50-minute lunch period in there. We also have a specials rotation that we'll do in the afternoon. So that will happen for students to be connected with PE, with art, with music. And then we're doing the oral language development. So this is in social studies and science. We put a number of content areas there because based on the schedule and what's happening in their day, that's how we would approach the learning for that particular grade level. We have snack time as well, and some cooperative and independent play. So there's some opportunities to do some cooperative play online, as well as independent play. If that's just their time to break, they need to add some motion for them for that time. That's what would happen. And then we kind of wrap up our day with some small group live instruction or some independent work, that gives us an opportunity to support all of our student learner needs. The 3rd through 5th grade schedule looks similar. We have those same kind of breakouts of independent and combined work. We have the same specials rotation, but we definitely have more established social studies and science. And since we're still trying to support literacy instruction in there, that's what's happening at the younger grades, whereas at the older grades, we've established that. We still have space for that to happen in 3rd through 5th, but we've established some social studies and science time in there with that same rotation built in the program. So you can see a schedule on Friday adjacent to that, and that would be where there might possibly be some morning live meetings with teacher and with the teacher and connecting on ELA and math instruction, and definitely some self-paced work. So you're getting 5 days of work. One of those days just happens to be more virtual than the others. And so that's kind of our sample schedule. That's posted and will be linked through this document here, and it's available for you guys to review as well as parents. So that's a brand new document that team finalized today for this meeting.
Yeah, thank you. I know that was a big ask from our families. Quite a few parents emailing and calling in, asking kind of what that sample virtual schedule. So the more we can share on that, I think the more informed our parents will be in terms of making choices. Mike, you're directly connected with working with some our PPS superstars like Paul Murray, Jessica Winstanley. Who else do we have in there? Is it Lisa Miller that did a lot of our planning for Teach Camp? Can you talk a little bit about kind of what was presented? I know we had a lot of questions around how are you preparing your staff for a virtual environment? And I know a lot of the focus of Teach Camp was around that, but I don't know, maybe if you can shed some light on what happened in the last couple of days.
Yeah, I certainly can. And I can bring up some of the session things too, I believe, by grabbing our Teach Camp schedule right here. So over the last 2 days, we've had Teach Camp. Those can normally would be something we do in person. We bring in a keynote, and we've done that. Instead, we did it virtually this year, mostly because we didn't know where we would be in August as we set things up. And we also wanted to make sure we were actually using the tools that we're going to be expecting teachers to be using as they walk into classrooms. And so we have these are Tuesday's session set, just to let you see what's there. Each of these boxes is a separate session that we're covering everything from classroom technical skills, like how do you use WeVideo, which is a video tool that we have available for staff, to, all right, finding our focus. What's our ELA priority standards in 3rd through 5th grade? So we've been able to provide that kind of learning for our staff around tools, around remote instruction. We even were able to bring in keynotes from some of our large vendors. We use Illuminate for assessments, and they were able to provide keynote services for us for free because we use the product. And so that was great to do a large keynote and do it remotely. So, but really the thanks goes to Jessica Winstanley, Paul Murray, and Lisa Miller. There's no doubt that they did a stellar job. And this was all in preparation for us to be able to teach Portage virtual. That's important. K-12 for us. We had to change our model based on spring. And so all of our staff got at least 6 hours of professional development over the past 2 days. For those that were absent or on break somewhere else, we're able to record all those sessions so you can still participate in that learning now. In fact, I have 2 more that I know I want to attend just to build up my own repertoire of interacting and teaching online. So we have those available, and we'll continue to reference those for staff for professional learning all through the fall. You could keep yourself busy for a long time doing this learning, so more than 60 sessions. We currently had over 2,100 individual teacher trainings happen in the last 2 days. So that would mean one teacher attending one session would count for one of those. So we have 2,100 teachers who have already filled back the feedback form on a session saying they attended. So that's about 4 to 6 hours per PPS teacher. I think that's great. And I share that right now as part of our deep dive into what we're doing to prepare for virtual learning for students as we kick off here in 2 weeks.
Okay. Again, we're committed to providing assistance to the families that rely on our school meals. We'll continue to do that 5 days a week for students attending face-to-face, as well as those that access PPS virtual. So there's more information and details to come. They'll be provided in the next upcoming weeks also be posted under the food service tab on the PPS website.
Yeah. Susan Livingston told me today that they'll be able to pre-order everything and you'll be able to pick them up at the buildings. So we know that that's kind of the approach that they're looking at for food service to make sure that even students who are virtual can still receive meals.
All right, Mike, let's transition into secondary. We're halfway there. So we're offering a fully virtual program for our secondary families with the option to stay at home to access that curriculum or to come in person to our secondary schools for support and Wi-Fi access. Okay, so that's kind of the gist of the 6th through 12th grade program. These were developed to provide all of the following that were important to our stakeholders. Maximum amount of flexibility and choice for our families. Meet the needs of the social and emotional well-being of our students and our staff. Keep folks safe. Use the guidance and practices from the County Health Department and the CDC with the goal of maintaining academic rigor that we're known for here in Portage. So that's kind of the gist of where we're at 6th through 12th grade. Let's look at just the PPS virtual in itself. All students 6th through 12th will participate in this program. We'll provide them the ability to interact with staff and engage with our curricula. Students will connect virtually with their teachers and classmates on a daily basis. They'll access lessons as recordings as well. If we move to phase 1 through 3, just like we mentioned in elementary, the system will be maintained. We'll be able to continue on with it, giving students that continuity regardless of the phase that we're in. Our primary goal is to open our secondary schools virtually with a schedule that's as close as traditional as possible. That doesn't mean kids are coming in and physically moving from class to class, but they will have to check in with attendance on a given, we have some sample schedules that I know that the high schools have been working on that will have kids logging on when they're supposed to follow that instructional schedule and engage in that synchronous learning that our teachers are going to provide. The same student expectations will apply for all secondary students, regardless if they come for in-building access or if they stay at home. All of that will be taught by our PPS teachers following our Portage curriculum. So we'll have 4 days of live recorded online instruction with PPS teachers Monday through Thursdays, follow a similar model on Fridays as we do in elementary. So that could be used for additional learning. Some students that'll be an opportunity for them to receive some additional teacher assistance or intervention, particularly with our sports support staff as well on Fridays. So even with virtual, we're going to work with our families to design appropriate IEP 504 plans as well as EL student support. So that's front and center for us too, to make sure that we're serving our families the best we can in terms of meeting their needs. Mike, do you want to cover food service and extracurricular?
Yeah, but before we jump into that, I just wanted to hit up the draft daily schedule so they could see that as well. So I know that this was from our secondary staff that this afternoon. There's draft written all over the top, and I think it's what we're trying to work out. I know we have more voices that we need to kind of bring to the table on this, but I know we've got a middle school and a high school draft schedule that puts about 10 to 15 minutes between classes. That allows for some breaks for our teenagers in these environments. So this is our schedule. If you're in person, it's the virtual learning schedule. So this is what it would look like to work through your day. Our middle schools still have our XDS advisory period in place so that we're able to kind of provide some individualized supports or some group supports for students. And then at the high school level, we're looking kind of to make sure we have enough time in between to allow for reset and allow for students to get ready for that next component of learning. We do get asked a lot, like, what's the daily schedule for secondary look like at home? What about for a middle school student who comes in? And students may access their virtual classes from wherever they are. And if they need an in-building support, they can report to the school for that day. Students will not attend a person in class, and we may not guarantee that they can get right with that teacher that they're taking the class with in that space. So that supervision will be provided by other PPS staff. We know that they can access all of those classes, and they will have access in the building for things like Wi-Fi and connection and supports. And students will be in groups in multiple areas throughout the building to maintain as much social distance as possible while still expecting the same mask protocols. So that's a little bit of their draft schedule to help support that. With the secondary program looking like it does, we have a number of content areas, and moving that schedule around and setting that up to make sure that those programs are ready. We have all of our secondary team leaders working on their curriculum modifications and adjustments right now, and they'll be in next week. And as we get ready for the school start, now that they've received some training through Teach Camp, to continue to build and learn what that curriculum pieces look like. And our communication platform is the same from what we've used before. And Michael wanted me to jump right into food service there. So that same pre-order process is there. There'll still be some same meals, and we are still providing that same support we mentioned earlier at elementary. So if you're at home and you're not attending, but you still want the meals, you're able to come and pick them up, and you're able to pre-order them. For families that are there, we're going cashless at the high schools, so that there are no transactions or opportunity to do that. So I know that we're going to be using the student IDs and accounts that we already have for meals, and encouraging and requiring students to use those, and then they can just get their meal there, and using those same safe protocols. We're also running all the extracurriculars as best as possible with that. And Michael, did you want to share on some of those extracurricular components that they're talking about?
You talking about for the fall, Mike, or?
Yeah, for the fall. And what
we're trying to put those in place as best we can. Again, like Rusty said, we're still on hold in terms of middle school athletics. We're hoping to be able to bring that back. I know that's at the top of the priority list. We continue to work with MHSAA and the Michigan Safe Start Roadmap as we bring back extracurriculars throughout the fall season. And so we'll just continue we learned a lot over the summer as well with our ADs, and just want to say thanks to Joe Wallace and to Chris Riker for kind of orchestrating, bringing our student athletes back, and also to those that led a lot of the performing arts outside with band. It was great to, like I said before, great to hear a band across at Central High, and also heard over at Northern. It's just wonderful to see. So, we learned from the summer, and we'll continue to implement some of those same strategies for the things that we are able to pull off this fall. Mike, let's move to technology access and health and wellness. So our students will use their district-issued Chromebooks to access that that coursework through Google Classroom. They'll utilize that platform as well as Google Meet, and have that opportunity to connect with their classmates. They'll also be able to schedule appointments with their counselors when they need that additional support. Again, health and wellness is a main priority of our plan. So students will have access to the support staff that are trained and ready to support the mental health and social and emotional needs of our students. And I just want to give a shout out to our student wellness team. They put together several strategies and recommendations for our buildings that we can utilize to make sure we're taking care of our kids. All right.
We had covered a lot of those health and wellness pieces earlier, and so you saw some of those protocols that we had done. And I don't think there was anything specific about the secondary students, but I do know that as we take a deep dive and we start practicing this, and phase 4 kicks off as we start the year, that our counselors are super aware and active at all levels on what's happening with our students in regards to their mental health, as well as to their physical health and wellness. So there's been a lot of conversation around that, and that you heard from parents as well. When they say they want that in person, we know that one of those factors for them is what it looks like to ensure that they're in school and connected with that, and that is a force that helps them maintain their mental health. And so we have that, whether you're in person or virtual, those connections will take place where we are.
Good. All right, talk a little bit about the in-building support. So our families do have the choice for in-building support if our students choose to elect that option. All of our students will be participating in virtual learning content. So we know that our families may desire to have that as part of their support system as they access this virtual instruction. So the curriculum's the same, but in-person support will allow students to be bused to school. They could utilize the PPS Wi-Fi technology as needed, and there'll be some academic supports as well. One of the main questions in the FAQ around in-building support is, will my secondary student be taught or have access to our secondary teachers? And so the initial plan is we really want to make sure that we're protecting our secondary teachers in terms of being able to pull off a virtual lesson without disruption. So we really want them to follow their schedule, because they're going to be leading, just like Mike and I are leading right now, and presenting and showing links and playing videos and creating different chat rooms and whatnot, breakout rooms. They need to be able to do that without disruption. So the initial responses right now is we want teachers to focus in on that at the secondary level, because you'll have students that are in a designated area at the secondary level, either based off a grade level or the amount of students that we know are anticipating coming in. I know middle school is working on maybe dividing up 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, having different entrances and different models for them to go about their schedule, but they're really trying to reduce the amount of not only interaction, but transitions within a day. So that's kind of our response to that. There'll be support staff in those areas to help with the learning. We'll work with teachers to figure out, is there a way that we can gradually put some of our teachers in front of those learning pods or those learning groups. That's just something that I think we still need to have more conversation with our teachers and our teacher group around what could that look like. I know we've talked about our special ed teachers being in those areas to make sure that kids are supported when needed. We could also do some things virtually too, with that support staff and some of our special ed teachers. So that's kind of the response to that as of right now. Moving into more of the health and wellness. Again, a lot of this is the same as what we covered in elementary. There really isn't a whole lot different. I think our protocols will apply, pre-K through 12th grade. Mike, I don't know, do you have anything else to add that was different than the elementary in terms of secondary?
No, we covered it on the elementary one, I believe.
Okay, so that's pretty much a similar slide there. The curriculum and instruction. So while in the building, they'll have the opportunity to engage in that curriculum. Again, accessing Wi-Fi if needed. They'll be in designated groups and areas, and we'll have PPS staff allocated to those areas. We're going to have attendance that'll be consistent with our PPS virtual program that can be taken online as well. So while in-person, students can receive that academic support. It'll be identical to our PPS virtual. And again, we'll work with families to make sure that we have the right IEP and 504 plans in place, and that our EL students are supported in the ways that they need to. Those may look different when in person, but the supports will be there. Again, we continue to use our communication platform. As with PPS Virtual, Google Classroom will be that core instructional hub, and our teaching staff will be available via email, phone calls, as well as Google Meets. That's kind of the gist of that. Mike, you got anything to add on curriculum?
I don't, other than to say, I know that one of the questions is about how we were evolving in this. And so as we kind of have these comments here, I know we get asked all the time, how will you improve? Will you be reflecting on it? And I know for both curriculum and instruction and the processes we've done, we're continuing to monitor, to adjust, to change. All of our teachers, including the ones who have both volunteered and dedicated and worked this summer on curriculum, are all working on this idea that as we do both in-person support or we're teaching virtually, that we've got our program ready to go. So they're talking about already, what does it look like to iterate that learning? The learning that they did as instructors this spring, even in moments when it was frustrating, are the things that we're changing now as we deliver our curriculum into this year. I was just talking with middle school science this week as they're working on establishing their curriculum and what those changes look like and how to do that. And they're talking like, okay, well, if they're at home, we can do this lab with paper towel. So it's kind of neat to see some of those processes happening and then talking about how they engage using the classroom video. So there's going to be a considerable amount of growth that happens that happens collaboratively with our teams that are working here to kind of improve instruction even right out of the gate.
Great. I think transportation is pretty much similar, Mike. So maybe that next slide, it's same as what we covered for elementary. Slide after that talks about food service. Anything else that I know cash transactions are not going to be accepted. Students and families will need to use their student ID to purchase lunches during their meal account. I'm not sure if we had mentioned that earlier. But other than that, it looks like mostly the same type of approach for elementary and secondary.
So, yep, that's exactly it.
Okay.
So,
Mike, you want to talk a little bit about the county virtual? I know there's lots of questions around that. And maybe if you have a link, maybe show some of the course program and catalog for folks to see.
Right, certainly. So, we talked about this, and I know you approved that program catalog. Wanted you guys to take a look at what's in there. So here's the program catalog based on the link that's on KRESA's website right now. And you'll be able to look at all the approved high school courses. It'll include where the content's provided by. And these little icons here around NCAA approved, and you can click for some class descriptions on here to get some other links. So the programming, now we're right at Michigan Virtual. So you can see that their catalog they've put together is great. It shows all of the courses that are available at high school. And then we're down here with some EFA courses that are provided through that, middle school courses at 6-8, and some virtual options that are there around language skills. And we have some career awareness, and then our elementary Lincoln Learning courses are in here also. So that's the course catalog from the KVIC program. And I think one of the questions that comes up around KVIC is around what does it look like to switch back and forth if we choose KVIC and want to come back to PPS or vice versa. And we know that the entry and exit with KVIC, they're fairly strict on their timelines, and that what we're able to support is a semester switch. So that decision needs to be made before we start the school year. And then the next opportunity to switch in or out of the KVIC program will be at the end of January when the first semester ends, and then again at the end of the school year as we get into the next school year.
Yeah, great. I think that last slide we have to wrap things up was another FAQ that was out there. Is what is the difference between Portage Virtual and the county virtual in terms of KVIC, particularly at the secondary level, and Michigan Virtual. So our PPS virtual programming takes advantage of our teachers and our curriculum and our resources, and is an excellent learning experience for our children in the district. It will also allow our students to transition between virtual and face-to-face more readily. Why? Because it's our curriculum, it's our scope and sequence, and we have more control over that. Plus, it's what we've developed. We're able to keep PPS students with our PPS teachers. KVIC is a countywide program that uses Michigan Virtual as a platform, and Lincoln Learning, like we said, young 5th through 5th grade. So like one of the trustees said, while the students will remain PPS students, they'll be taught by a certified teacher from the Kalamazoo County in the KVIC model. But they'll have a PPS mentor. That's another question that we've got is, will the PPS mentor be a PPS teacher? And I'd have to say not necessarily. Most likely that would be some type of support staff to start. That's a 5-day-a-week program, a minimum commitment, like Mr. Huber said, as a semester. It's a little bit less flexible option, but it's self-paced and it works best for those that are self-motivated. That's one thing we learned from Clint Wagner and May Orr as they led up the 100% virtual team this summer. Those guys did wonderful work, really learning about KVIC and the differences between what we'll offer versus what they'll offer. Again, it could be a good fit for some of our students depending on who the student is. So, if a family's looking into that, just know what the commitment is, and also know that our teachers aren't necessarily connected with the program. So that was a lot of information. We've got an entire team I know present right now that could probably help field some questions that I know you all have. So Mike, maybe we can open up for a little Q&A and do our best to answer what we can.
Certainly we can do that. And I also want to say thank you. We took a deep dive with you guys, and it was intentional. And we know that there's a lot in that we just presented on because we wanted to get questions answered and we wanted you to see the depth of which we're working at. And so I appreciate you hanging in there with us for as long as you did to take a look at all the stuff that we have in it. So yeah, let's open it up for Q&A.